Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to do today's broadcast. I haven't spent a week without communicating with you guys out there. I thank you for joining me at this time and thank you for being a part and parcel of the work that we've been doing. Now, lately I've been having areas of encouragement for people who don't seem to come on live or don't seem to have shown a physical interest in what I'm doing, but I've tremendously been following the work and effort that I've been doing through this live broadcast. Now, I would like to begin by thanking everyone who has ever watched any of the broadcasts and everyone who has taken time to either ask questions or send in comments or responded one way or the other to the issues of leadership like discussed. Again, thank you for all your time. Thank you for the data you spend or utilize in trying to draw lessons from me as I try to teach on this concept of leadership. Now, this is so critical, it is so important that we basically have no choice but to pay attention to the concept of leadership uh, as it's being taught because again I've quoted this over and over and over again. Justin Maxwell would say that everything rises and falls on leadership. And I agree with that totally because the world over the differences between families, differences between nations, differences between schools, hospitals, and the rest have been the difference at the point of leadership. It's been the difference at the point of leadership. Now, I do not know how you understand what leadership is. I do not know how vital and critical you think that leadership is or is not. But I will tell you categorically again that leadership is very critical. It is at the core of everything human, everything human, every venture that any human being embarks on will depend pretty well on the kind of leadership that he or she has provided or that has been provided towards him or her. Okay? So thank you so much for paying attention. Secondly, I would like to also um, broadcast the fact that Born to Lead has organized a webinar on Zoom. It's a paid webinar for a token fee of 1,000 naira if you're in Nigeria. Again, depending on what part of the world you are, so make your calculations. And there is a flyer that has gone out on my on this page, on YouTube, on Instagram, b.t.lee, on my WhatsApp status, on my Facebook page, and so on. There is a flyer that goes on to indicate the kind of webinar that will be had, or yes, that will be had on the 12th of this month, 12th of September. Now, so if you haven't registered for the webinar, I would encourage you to go through the flyer, find the details, and ensure that you apply your resources to be a part and parcel of that webinar. I will be talking about the fact that you were born to lead. I've met and encountered a number of people who constantly debate this idea, this concept of leadership. And I have always I'm trying to do this. This is not unusual. I've had a small power failure. That destroys leadership. So that's why I start today's lesson as this go along. There are a number of things that we will grab, a number of things that uh, will help us understand what are those factors that will tend to destroy I can't understand what the issue are, but please bear with me. Soon I'm sure that everything will be rectified. So if you are following me, I'm talking about the seven deadly social sins, what I call the seven deadly social sins. Now these things are things that have to do with our social arrangement, to do with of, our political setup as a people, as a nation, as an environment, the world over. So these things would include so many other issues that confront us as well. Now, I will, because of time, want to go in straight to discuss the issues as they arise as far as this teaching session is concerned. I'm attempting to have this on slide as much as I can so that so that I would draw some benefits from it. So please bear with me as we keep seeing changes around the screen. Okay. Now I mentioned that these things, or rather these seven deadly sins, were first originated by an Anglican priest in his sermon. Okay. The Anglican priest named Frederick Louis Donaldson first mentioned this in 1925, sometime around March, and he preached this in his church. And thereafter, well, from story to here, he probably sent it to the man we call Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who, of course, who we popularly know as Mohandas or Muhammad Gandhi, who published it in a publication he had then called the Young India on October 22, 1925. And because of that, Mahatma Gandhi has been popularized as the person who um, basically promoted this concept of the seven deadly sins. Okay, now we're going to look at the seven deadly sins and try to make sense out of what we will see. I can tell you that they are interesting. I can tell you that they are captivating. I can also tell you that these things will probably be um, challenging for every one of us. Now I'm getting signals that my audio is not clear, not very clear. So I would please with me again if you share that link, let me know as quick as possible so I can make corrections immediately. But I'm certain that my the audio of my session is clear. Um, so bear with me if you can't hear me. I'll just make some effort to make some adjustments on the audio. Now, so these are the seven deadly things, like I said, and I'll try to, as quick as possible, make some comments on the deadly things, and hopefully, um, Hopefully, we'll make some bit of progress as we proceed. The first of these is politics without principle. Politics without principle. Now, the fact is this, okay? The fact is this, that right now, there are, the world over, people who practice politics without principle. Okay? This is quite a deadly thing. Okay? To practice politics without principles is quite a deadly thing. And why do we refer to this as a deadly thing? Or why do we refer to this as a misnomer? Now, politics is a way of life for every individual. Now, you may be a politician or not, or rather, you may be practicing politics with your wife and children. There is a level of politics that you've got to play in your home to stabilize your environment, to stabilize your situation. Okay? So, politics without principles has been considered one of the deadly things that can destroy any leader. And why do we say that this is deadly? Because again, all across the board, people now have learned not to trust politicians. Okay, so once someone comes out and says he or she is a politician, the tendency for us to distrust the person, to dislike the person. And again, why is this so? This is so because of so many reasons. Okay, it is amongst politicians that we have people making false promises. Many years ago, there was a politician in the northern part of Nigeria where I reside. And by the way, I'm a Nigerian. So many years ago, in the northern part of Nigeria, there was a politician who promised to make a tap of a special delicacy, a combination of milk from cow with millet. So what we call fura de nono. There was a time a politician made a promise that he was going to supply tap that would provide milk mixed with to enjoy in office for as long there was nothing of such that ever came forth. Nothing of such promises that he was unable to keep. Right now, that is the trend anywhere across the globe. Whether in the world, Donald Trump, the president of America, made so many flamboyant promises. Of course, he's been able to keep certain promises, but a chunk of the promises that he made and made publicly, he's been unable to keep. He's been unable to keep. We have governments across the world, especially in Africa, of men and women who rise up to make promises that they are completely unable to keep. Why? Because they do politics without principles. Okay? Principles are natural laws that guide and protect the conduct, or should guide and protect the conduct of every human affair. Principles are natural laws that wherever you remove them and take them to, they hold water. Okay? What should be a principle in Nigeria ought to be a principle in the UK, in Slovakia, in Ukraine, or wherever you find yourself. And so if you run politics without principle, the danger is that you will that's the situation. Today in Nigeria, it is common to be elected from one political party and to go around 3, 4 political parties for a 4-year tenure. Why? Because there are so many politicians who do politics without principle. These people make promises and undo the promises. Today, we do not look for leaders. We simply look for politicians, people making undue compromises. In fact, there are people who will tell you that for you to be able to survive in politics, you've got to make undue compromises. This, in my view, is wrong. Because a man of principle or a politician of principle will stand by the truth regardless of how offensive the truth is to him or her. So politics without principle is a sin and will destroy or damage the life of any community, will destroy a group of people, and it is destructive as far as leadership is concerned. Therefore, I suggest that we flee from such politics if ever we get involved in such situations. What is the solution to this? The solution to this is to stick to the principles. There are rules that guide everything that humans do. Okay? These rules are aimed at helping us prospering in what we do. Now, if we fail to keep to those rules, we will end up doing politics without principles. And again, like I mentioned, this is very, very destructive and can be so damaging that before you know it, you have destroyed the people, the very people that you are supposed to be leading. So, principles or politics without principles is the first of those deadly things. The second is wealth without work. Okay? Wealth without work. This is again on its own very, very terrible. The sin number two, wealth without work. This is attempting to get something for nothing. As a lawyer, I know we have a principle that you cannot place something on nothing and expect it to stand. And that is a principle in life. You cannot place something on nothing and expect it to stand. It will fall. However, we have got people right now who are attempting to be wealthy. Again, my own claim as an example. We have people who solicit for appointments in government only because it would suggest to them that it is their quickest way to wealth. The truth is that if you do not work, you are not entitled to wealth. I do not know the endless hours, but I tell you, there were endless hours when Bill Gates, all right, spent in trying to start up Microsoft. Jeff Bezos also would have spent endless hours in trying to ensure that his, as it were, his organization Amazon started well. He would have spent endless hours doing that. Why? Because they knew the value, or they've always known the value of work. There is great value in work. There is great value in work. Anytime that you attempt to get something for nothing, you are actually violating the second principle, or you are actually running into the second sin, which is wealth without work. Anytime you manipulate people and or things, all right, to get wealth, you are actually running foul of the second rule, which is that you must work before you get wealth. There is no wealth that should come to us without work. That's why I get scared when I see, and you see, these are obvious things. When you see any Ponzi scheme, it is obvious, and it should be obvious to us, because Ponzi schemes always suggest to us that we can just throw in our money, and before sunset, all right, at sunrise we throw in our money, and before sunset we have made triple what we had suggested, or in terms quoted to be investment. This isn't true. A few years ago, it was MMM that reigned in this part of the world, where people just dropped in their money, and after a month, they made twice or thrice or triple what they had even invested. I had a cousin who continually talks to me about about investing in MMM, and I made my argument, and I said this is a Ponzi scheme. Why? Because there is no work attached to the money that you are supposedly investing. And there, by the way, there is nowhere in the world and no business in the world where you put in a particular sum of money and within 1 month you make 100% profit. There is nowhere in the world that happens. Therefore, wealth without work, okay? Wealth without work is a great sin that will destroy any society, that will destroy any environment. Wealth without work will shatter any community. We have this common saying, and I know it cuts across the globe, all right, that the lazy man should not eat. And that is true. Why? Because without work, there cannot be wealth. And where anyone gains wealth without work, I bet you it won't be long. The person will either destroy himself or his family or loved ones around him. That's what happens when you acquire wealth without work. So, wealth without work is sin number 2. The third sin is what I would call, the third sin is what I would call pleasure without conscience. Okay? Pleasure without conscience. This in itself is a huge, huge problem. Pleasure without conscience. Anytime that this happens, it simply means that people overindulge themselves and want instant gratification for self and not for the larger community. When a man rapes a woman, it is simply because, or of course, vice versa, or when women rape men, it is simply because they want pleasure without conscience. When people get high on drugs, even prescribed drugs that they abuse, when people get high on prescribed drugs that are abused, it is because people want pleasure without conscience. Incidentally, every one of us has a conscience. Our consciences will continue to prick us. But you see, as humans, we have the ability to deaden our consciences, to quieten our consciences, so that they do not disturb us or remind us of the things that we've done wrong. Every time that there is selfishness, every time that we're inconsiderate, every time that we're insensitive to the plight of others, it simply says that we want to enjoy pleasure without conscience. And this happens across board. I've gone to wedding ceremonies or receptions for wedding events where wealthy people, all right, wealthy people struggle for a plate of rice. The same people that can actually buy a bag of rice and cook it for the community to eat, these same people go to wedding ceremonies and fight over a plate of rice. Why? Because they want pleasure without conscience. Many years ago, an anti-corruption conference was organized here in the federal capital territory of Abuja, and I was a part and parcel of those who been for the Nigerian participants, the second dinner being for the international participants. Of course, being amongst the organizer meant that I needed to be at both dinners. Now, the first dinner that was organized for Nigerians had very few people in attendance. Very, very few people were in attendance. Now, because we had very few people in attendance, we had so much food. We had food in abundance. And everybody ate to his fill. And a day was supposed to be for the international participants, and it required the Nigerians who were organizers to be a part and parcel of that international dinner. Incidentally, because of what had transpired the day before, there were some who saw how much food was left and they perhaps felt cheated. So the next day, a number of them came with family members to a dinner that the family members had no business attending. When it was see the chaos that broke out when people were rushing to go and get their meal. Some parents who came with their children who didn't even know how to spell the word corruption, came to that dinner. Now, when those parents were to serve those children and they served those children, and bottom line is a lot of the children abused the food because they couldn't even eat a quarter of what they had been served. Why? Because the parents threw away their consciences and wanted pleasure for their family members. So pleasure without conscience will destroy us. Pleasure without conscience is destructive and will destroy any community. And this we must take note of. Pleasure without conscience is exceptionally destructive and will destroy just about anybody. All right? So we must be cautious when we try to gain or enjoy pleasure because I don't know how to express this, but I just know that if we attempt to do pleasure without consciences, we will truly destroy ourselves as a people. The next is knowledge without character. The truth is that knowledge puffs people up. The more knowledge you have, the tendency for you to be arrogant, the tendency for you to be proud. However, knowledge is supposed to humble you. Knowledge is supposed to guide you. Knowledge is supposed to trim your excesses. But if you do not have character, the reverse is what happens, is what transpires. The reverse is that knowledge will puff you up. Knowledge will make you proud. Now, what does character do? Character tends to let us understand our limits. No matter how knowledgeable you are, you have a limit. In fact, I usually play with a friend of mine who incidentally is a professor in his field. Okay? And I tell him, well, for me, I am more vast in knowledge than himself. And he says, well, so over some time, he began to ask me what I meant by that. And I told him that he was knowledgeable to the best of his ability in a single field in his entire work or in his entire field. But I was broad-based because I was still reading other things to be able to catch up. And he laughed about it. You know, we joked about it. But the truth is this, okay? No matter how knowledgeable you are still limited as far as life is concerned. You may have 2, 3 doctoral degrees in several fields. You just have degrees in fields, in certain fields, and not in the entire aspect of life. So knowledge without character is very, very destructive. Knowledge without character sets people up for destruction. And of course, pride goes before destruction. All the time. Pride goes before destruction. We must learn to temper our knowledge with character. Again, basically, because no matter what we do, no matter how we see it, no matter how we like it or do not like it, knowledge without character is destructive to us. The fifth sin is commerce without morality. Commerce without morality. And what do I mean by that? Of course, just by layman's discussion or layman's definition, commerce is the act of trading, buying and selling for the sake of making profit. Okay? But you see, every commerce has an ultimate aim of improving people. Profit is not the ultimate aim of any commercial venture that we engage in. Profit is an offshoot of the fact that we've made people better than when we met them. Therefore, when we do any form of commercial practice, it must be done with morality. It must be done with morality because commerce without morality is destructive. There are people who rationalize lies just to make profit. Again, if you are in this part of the world, when you go to market, the reason why we continue to bargain on the day that we want to purchase things is because we do not even trust the prices that have been given to us by the marketers. Why? Because again, the marketers tend to hike the price so that when they have done so, when you come, if you are a layman and you just go straight and make purchases, they may have made 3 times the profit they should have ever made in trying to do business with you. They rationalize lies. They give you 100 reasons why the prices of their items have to be the same, have to be the way that it is. Because they do what? They rationalize lies that they speak. Anytime that there is justification, whether you were right in doing what you do. Anytime that you determine to make profit at all costs, anytime that making profit at all costs is your major aim, it is clear that you are running commerce without morality. Again, many people have ended up duping their own organizations, defrauding their organizations of huge chunks of money just because they have been running commerce without morality. Morality is our rules, our principles of life that I'm having a bit of a challenge with power source. I can't say what the issue is, and I apologize for the small break. We were talking about commerce without morality, and again, I'll just continue to okay, continue to plead with you to bear with me as I'll soon be through with this um, session. Okay, so we're talking about commerce without morality, and I just do hope that we understand what I'm aiming to say to us. Okay, so commerce without morality will destroy every environment, every community. Now, what I'm trying to also something that I'm trying to emphasize by way of solution is that we must think win-win always. We must think win-win always. Every time we think, we must think of win-win, a win-win situation in every commercial venture or activity that we embark on. Because commerce without morality is destructive and will destroy every environment or every society where we find ourselves. All right. The next, um, the next of these things is science without humanity. Science without humanity. And I'll just share a story that should probably help us understand this aspect. Okay? A lot of us know the Nobel Peace Prize, or no, not Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize, okay, for science, for peace, for literature. In fact, um, one of the citizens of Nigeria had won the Nobel Peace Prize for literature many years ago. Okay, he's an astute man in terms of literature and then his work in life. Now, a lot of us are familiar with Alfred Nobel in that regard. Why? Because he did science with humanity as far as the Nobel Peace or Nobel Prize is concerned. Why do I keep calling this Peace Prize? Okay, as far as the Nobel Prize is concerned, great men like Mother Teresa, or great men and women like Mother Teresa, like Nelson Mandela, like Desmond Tutu, like Wole Soyinka, and a whole lot of other persons have won prizes in different fields as far as Nobel Prize is concerned. However, not many of us know how the Nobel Prize was commenced. And not many of us know that Alfred Nobel was the same man who invented dynamite. In fact, the bombs that were thrown at Nagasaki during the Second World War that destroyed Nagasaki was part and parcel of the invention of this same man called Alfred Nobel. And how did he arrive at starting a prize for science based on humanity? He did that when there was a publication about the death of his younger brother, and people mistook the death of the brother for himself, and nasty things were written about him. So he had the privilege of knowing the things that would have been said about him if he had actually died. And from that moment on, he flipped the situation, he changed the story, and commenced the prize, the award for people who had inventions or people who had successes in different fields of life. Why? Because it has gotten to the point where he realized that science without humanity was also useless and destructive. In America, millions of children or babies have been destroyed in the name of drawing out stem cells to be able to treat older people who were nearly dying. So we killed those, all right, in America, we killed those who were just beginning life so that we can extend the life of those who were already at the point of death. That logic beats my imagination. People take out embryos so they can turn them to drugs or medicine for the sake of people who were already nearly dead, and no matter what you did, they would die at one point. Why? Because humanity has been taken away from science. For the people who have invented bombs and several wicked weapons, they invented them by science, but unfortunately, they have also invented those sciences or carried out those science activities without humanity. That isn't correct. Science without humanity is destructive. It has destroyed our environment. It has destroyed our livelihood. It has destroyed communities. And again, we could call several examples of activities of science that have been conducted and carried out without humanity. So science without humanity is destructive and will at any time never be permissible and should never be permissible. Now, the seventh sin is interesting because, again, it speaks to everybody regardless of what you believe in or who you serve or who you worship. And by the way, okay, as a human being, you must worship something. It doesn't matter what faith you think you believe in. Even atheists believe in something. Atheists believe in something. Just as Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Shintoists, Confucianists all believe in certain things. Now, for every form of those worship, for every form of those religious beliefs and activities, there must be some level of sacrifice. Unfortunately, all right, unfortunately, there are many people who attempt to worship without sacrifice. There are many people who tend to want to take on worship without sacrifice. And I'll tell you completely that that will never work. There are people who are contented with the social facade of religion, okay? So they are interested in the piety of religious practices and activities, but do not adhere to the rules and principles of those religious practices that they carry out. I have a friend here that goes to the same church with me, and she shares this story with me every time that people tend to be in trouble and they become pious, as it were, at that point of their trouble. And she told me a story of many years ago, told me a story of her brother or her brother who had a clique of friends who were all drunkards. And that, day in, day out, they never ended their evening until they were drunk. Now, but that she noticed that every time any one of them had trouble, because they constantly had trouble, drinking all night, okay, going to work in the morning meant that at least one of them would be in trouble. And that every time one of them was in trouble, they fasted for the person. So they abandoned alcoholism until late in the evening. They even prayed for the person. But as soon as the person escaped the trouble for which they were praying, they went back to their habit of drinking. Why? Because they worship without sacrifice. A few years ago, we had a controversy of a lady somewhere in a state, Lagos State of Nigeria, who accused a pastor of raping her many years ago. And of course, the pastor debated it. They went to court, used technicalities to quash a number of the issues that had been raised. Okay? But whether he was correct or not, whether he did it or not, is not the issue in this case. The issue is the fact that because many people attempt to worship without sacrifice, that is why such controversies have been rising up in our community and in our days and times as this. A few years ago, a man was arrested for defrauding his organization. He worked in one of the five-star hotels in the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja, where he had defrauded the hotel of over 40 million naira. And a chunk of the money he took and gave as tithe in a church that should have suspected and raised questions about his source of funding or his source of income. And of course, that community collected the money and didn't ask any questions, even though they knew that the person's salary could not afford what he was releasing to them in the name of tithe. Why? Because people want to worship without sacrifice. Now, I say this. If you find yourself victim of any of the sins that I've mentioned, and of course, I label them sins because the original author, okay, the Anglican Bishop Frederick, named them as sins. These are societal vices that tend to destroy every society. Now, if you have found any one of these, you will need to make adjustments. And the quickest way to make adjustments is to find out what the principles are as far as any of this thing is concerned and adhere to the principles for a better life. Worship without sacrifice, science without humanity, commerce without morality, pleasure without conscience, politics without principles. Any of these have the ability to not only destroy those who practice it, but to destroy their families and to destroy their communities at large. My encouragement this afternoon is for you to go back to all of these principles or all of these things, check out where you are wanting and make adjustments. And I confess to you that there are areas where I find myself lacking. What helps me is I constantly retrace my steps so I can have a better family, so I can have a better society around me. I'll draw the curtains at this point, appreciating you for taking time to be with me, thanking you for your comments, thanking you also for being online with me. I will continue on broadcast on Saturday at 1 p.m. But meanwhile, like I mentioned earlier on, go on my Facebook page, all right, and see the things that I would want to do on the 12th of September. There is a training coming up, a webinar coming up on Zoom on the 12th of September. Please register and be a part and parcel of that webinar. The topic of that webinar is You Were Born to Live. Every one of us was born to live. We were created and born to live. Not many of us realize that. Not many of us understand that. In fact, not many of us understand the concept of leadership. Now, at that webinar, you will hear the definition of leadership that I've always held on to and that have carried me through life. And at that webinar, I'll give at least 4 reasons that I am certain that you were created and born to live. Those reasons will be convincing. Those reasons will be touchy. Those reasons will go to the heart of the matter as far as leadership is concerned. I will encourage you to register. There are numbers that are scrolling right now. The very last number is the number we use on WhatsApp. Now, if you make payments for that seminar and it is a token fee, and I share with you the reason why we've got to add a token fee is so that you show how serious you are to want to learn the things that the things that will be taught on that day. So I encourage you, go on Instagram, b.c.live and see the flyer. Go on Facebook on my page, Shedrack Bako, and see the flyer and learn how to register. Register, and then you'll be given the way into the webinar. And on the 12th, we'll have that webinar. And I'm hoping that your life will not remain the same even after that webinar. Thank you for your time. And I just do pray that you have a wonderful week ahead of you. See you next time on Saturday. Bye-bye.